Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. Senator Chuck Schumer famously said shortly after Trump was elected, "You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you." In light of the failed Russiagate hoax and this nonsense with Ukraine, this characterization appears to be spot on. Should we all fear the deep state? Cross-talking the deep state, I'm joined by my guest, Daniel McAdams in COUP. He's the executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. In Washington, we cross to Richard Goodstein. He is a Democratic strategist and a former campaign advisor to Bill and Hillary Clinton. And in New York, we cross to John Burnett. He is managing director and founder of One Empire Group, a business and political consultancy company. All right, gentlemen, crosstalk rules in effect. That means you can jump in anytime you want, and I always appreciate it. Daniel McAdams, let me go to you. You inspired this program with an interview you did a few days ago, and this is what caught my eye, this one sentence here. It was a great interview, but this sentence here stuck out. The U.S. has ceased being a republic and has become a national security state. Elaborate on what you mean. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, the national security state, really essentially formed with the 1947 National Security Act, which created the CIA, the NSA, and really created a secret underground government that is not really subject to democracy. And I saw a lot of this when I was on Capitol Hill. And in fact, the term deep state was coined by a good friend of mine on Capitol Hill, Mike Lofgren. But on Capitol Hill, you had permanent committee staff members who are not subject to democratic elections. They wrote the legislation. They worked together regardless of party. They were beholden to special interests. I remember sitting there and having a bill dealing with the Middle East, and one of the permanent staffers says, "Don't worry about it. This is AIPAC approved." It happened all the time. They were subject to special interests, not to democracy. These people, politicians come and go. Representatives are elected or unelected, but these people stay forever. And there's a lot of it on Capitol Hill, but it certainly is elsewhere in government as well. Okay, well, Richard, let me go to you. I mean, if you like the term or not, deep state, it seems like a lot of people in the intelligence community are at the forefront, front and center of these recent fake scandals, Russiagate, now Ukrainegate. I mean, it's FBI, it's CIA, it's Justice Department. They seem to be intruding upon the democratic process here, and they seem to do with a lot of immunity, at least up until this point. There's some reports coming out. Maybe that will change. But these people are, weaponizing their positions in power. And I don't want to get partisan here, because this happened during the Obama administration, these figures here, and went into the Trump administration. I'm worried about institutions. As Daniel said, politicians come and go. Go ahead, Richard.
Unlike perhaps some of you on this show, I tend to side with the U.S. intelligence community. This is in contrast to our distinguished president, over Vladimir Putin. I tend to think that when our intelligence community and, say, the bipartisan Senate Intelligence Committee concludes that the Russians did indeed, again, President Trump doesn't buy this, but every other able-minded person does, did indeed interfere with the U.S. elections, I tend to accept that as fact, not addled fiction about a deep state.
Richard, you're not really answering my question here, okay? I mean, if you look at the investigations that have been done with these scandals here, there are people facing indictments. People were fired for lying. People are investigation for a number of things that shouldn't have been part of their mandate. I mean, they're supposed to execute policy and not create it. And there's an ample amount of evidence that these people did this. Let me go. I know you're frustrated here, but let's get everybody in first. John, you want to react to that, and then we'll make it a free-for-all. Go ahead, John.
Well, I never thought I would say this, but actually I agree with Richard in the sense that I think that we were established on law and order, but we're missing the order part with respect to some of our law enforcement agencies. Some of them lean right, some of them lean left. However, in law enforcement, you're supposed to protect and uphold the principles and the safety and national security of the country and not lean to your own political leanings and thoughts and views. And I think that's what we're seeing here with respect to the whistleblower and some other things that transpired in the past. And let's actually be honest here. I think that people were so used to business as usual, and under this president, President Trump, he's not business as usual. He's business unusual, right? Because he's saying, you know what, there are things that have been going on for so long, and we have to correct them. We have to make sure that there's fair and balance with respect to our economy, with respect to our political interactions and so forth. And that's making a lot of people uncomfortable, including the law enforcement community.
Okay, you know, Daniel, but there's an ample amount of evidence that the intelligence community has gone after Donald Trump. I mean, there's so much evidence out there, it really boggles the mind on some of the behaviors of some people in high positions of government that are not elected, as you pointed out here. And what bothers me is if this is normalized, then what sitting president can feel safe with the intelligence community looking over their shoulder? I mean, this is a chilling effect. Again, I'd like to keep this nonpartisan here. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, what boggles my mind is seeing otherwise intelligent people repeating the mantra, I trust the national intelligence agencies, I trust the national intelligence agencies. These are the people that have lied to us for 40 years. They lied us into war in Iraq. They've lied to us. That is their job. Even Pompeo said, my job is to lie, cheat, and steal. That is the job of the intelligence agencies. Let's drill down on the claim that they concluded that the Russians interfered in the elections. He's talking about the 2017 Intelligence Committee assessment, not NIE assessment, a whole new product invented out of whole cloth by John Brennan, who admittedly had a hand-picked group of analysts determined that Russia interfered in the elections. The same John Brennan who says that President Trump is a traitor, he is a tool of Putin. This is absurd. There's never been any proven evidence that the Russian government interfered in our elections at all. So you can believe what you want, but facts speak for themselves.
Okay, Richard, go ahead, jump in.
So let's talk about facts. Let's talk about facts. Mike Pompeo, when he was, who we now actually, I guess, trust, right, as Secretary of State.
Oh, well, I don't.
He was head of the CIA.
I don't.
He lent his voice. He lent his voice to the voice of the head of national intelligence, and otherwise to say, yes, indeed, the Russians did interfere with the 2016 elections. Dick Cheney called that an act of war. We have two North Stars.
Yeah, but Richard, you keep sidestepping my question. You keep
That's why the show's called The Deep State. He's part of it.
Okay, but you keep sidestepping it here. You know, Andy McCabe was fired for lack of candor. Okay, because he lied to his own people. Fired him. It wasn't Donald Trump that did it. Okay, and if you look at, I hope they do. I hope they do. I hope they prosecute all of them. Okay, to show that there is equal justice under the law, and not because you have a special card in your pocket that you're in the deep state, meaning you can do whatever you want. I want to protect institutions, Richard, not people. Go ahead, Richard.
There are two. Let's talk about facts. Deep state is kind of this religion that we kind of pray to in some quarters, that somehow that basically covers over everything that maybe somebody who we support, Donald Trump in some cases, has done badly. Oh, it's the deep state's fault. There are two North Stars here, and none of which came from the mainstream media or the deep state. Paul Manafort's lawyers acknowledged that their client, Manafort, met with Russian spy to give them the most innermost secrets, polling secrets of the Trump campaign in 2016.
Was he prosecuted for that?
The Trump
was he
White
prosecuted
House,
for that?
Was that a crime?
White House.
Was that a crime?
No.
Why? Crime?
Why? Here's why not. There's two witnesses to that. There's two witnesses, Manafort, who's a lawyer, and the Russian spy, who presumably is in Russia and is not willing to come over here to testify. That's why they didn't prosecute him for that. And the second fact is the so-called transcript that the Trump White House put out that said, we want to buy weapons. Oh, do us a favor, though. So those are the two facts. Forget the deep state.
Does that mean it's a quid pro quo? Do you read that as a quid pro quo? I don't read it as a quid pro quo. I read it as well. Okay.
I think when a mafia boss says,
I think, Richard,
like
as usual, I just think Trump was sloppy. He usually is. He very often is. John, jump in before we go to the break. Go ahead.
Yeah, here's the situation. I think it's clear that Russia did meddle in the election. However, there are a lot of people, especially in the law enforcement community here in the U.S., that don't like the way President Trump is going about handling it. He's trying to work with other governments. He's also trying to say, you know what, there are certain things that the U.S. can work with Russia on with respect to the Middle East and other areas around the world. So it's a delicate dynamic. I think, some on one side, they want him to actually be more forceful. The other side, they want him to be more strategic. He's the leader of the free world. He's trying to find that delicate dynamic. I think he found it, and I think he's also trying to work through Ukraine and other areas to try to get to the bottom of it, to make sure that we can make sure that we can actually protect our electoral process and as well as our national security at home and abroad.
Richard, don't you? In 1 minute to go for Daniel. Don't you think it's really hypocritical? I mean, I'm going to give up on this. They keep repeating it, and they believe it's their religion. That's fine. I agree that there's been no concrete evidence of Russian meddling, but we can just put that to a side. We're not going to make any progress on it.
I don't agree.
Daniel, you have American senators petitioning the Ukrainian government for dirt on Donald Trump. But when Donald Trump asks about illegal behavior of a member of the American government, former member, that's called colluding and being traitorous. But other people do this all of the time.
Well, he asked for them to look into it.
Go ahead,
not
Daniel, go right ahead before we go to the break.
I mean, anyone who sees a smoking gun in this phone call is smoking something, let's put it that way. And also, let's make a distinction between Russia and the Russian government. Mueller was directed by a judge to stop talking about the Internet Research Agency as a Russian government because there's no evidence it's connected to the Russian government. That's an important distinction.
Okay, that was perfect. We've run out of time for this part of the program. Gentlemen, we're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the deep state. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter LaBelle. To remind you, we're discussing the deep state. Okay, let's go back to Richard in Washington. I think the recent Russiagate hoax and this whole nonsense with Ukraine does show there's the existence of a deep state. We can argue the terminology of it, but it's there. But Richard, a concrete question, okay? Do you find it bothersome? Again, I'm trying to not be partisan here. I'm a very partisan person. You know that, but I'm trying not to be on this program here because I'm interested in institutions and ideas, not just the fate of certain politicians. But Richard, do you find it disturbing that high-level members of the intelligence community leave the intelligence community and instantly get a job on cable? And they still have these security clearances. And one has to wonder, when you think of Clapper and Brennan and people like that, they have a security clearance, they get information, then they can leak it to their employer, and then they're asked to report on it. I mean, I find that extremely uncomfortable because it's very circular, and it is for their own personal advantage, okay? I mean, because they have animus towards the President of the United States, and you're going to use all their access to top-level information that none of us have to use against them and for their own personal profit. Do you have a problem with that, Richard? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether you're as equally disturbed of the people who've left the Trump administration who have had security clearances, who've gone to Fox News, who use it to their benefit. Look,
I agree with you. I agree with you. I agree with you completely. Absolutely agree with you.
And I'm saying... Yeah, and I'm saying that if any one of them disclosed classified information on the air or in some inappropriate way, that clearance would be yanked in a nanosecond.
We're in agreement.
I don't buy your premise, which is they get something they shouldn't have and they put it out on the airwaves.
Well, I mean,
think that's a fiction.
Yeah, but
I understand
Richard,
why people want to believe it.
But Richard, don't you? Yeah, I think you would kind of agree that these former officials tend to go to MSNBC and CNN, by large measure, really, okay? Very high-level people here. But, I mean, in principle, I think if you're using your security clearance to profit from it personally and for your career, I think that's disgraceful. I think that's dishonest. And it isn't something that was normal. It wasn't normal a few years ago. Now it is the norm now. Look at John Bolton. He's going to go around selling all his secrets and leaks and all that. Disgusting behavior from a disgusting human being. You know, John, the same thing to you. I mean, we have this commingling of of the state, the deep state, and the media. And I'm very uncomfortable about it because they send out a very mono political culture message all of the time. And I think it's a distortion, and I don't think the American people are very well informed by this at all. It's self-serving for these cable networks and for these former officials. Go ahead, John.
Perhaps the most surprising thing is all out in the open. We're all observing it. And I'm not sure why Richard cannot agree with the fact that they are profiting from it. And also, they're not disclosing the information in the confidential reports and top secret reports, right? But they know how to craft a message. They know how to craft talking points around it to actually push a certain narrative. And they're doing that on the media platform, not just regular media, prominent media platforms. In essence, pushing propaganda, the same thing that they accuse other nations for doing. And I think that is the most detrimental thing throughout this whole thing. And as you pointed out, they're actually profiting from it, and it's a disgrace.
You know, Daniel, is there any remedy for all of this at all? Because it seems to me that we had you gave the lineage of the CIA and the intelligence community here, but there is a marriage now with the media and political elites, and it seems to me unless there's a law where you have a top secret clearance, you can't personally benefit from it for 5 years or something like that, which may be a remedy right there. But it seems to get just worse and worse. I mean, this recent quote-unquote whistleblower, but by any definition, it's not a whistleblower at all, okay? But this seems to have been crafted by members of Congress, Schiff and these people like this, and it is a functionary in the CIA. Again, all of these scandals come from within the deep state. These are the characters that are creating it, or generating it, because as far as I'm concerned, and I know Richard's going to disagree with me, and that's fine, that's why we like having him on the program, but Russiagate was one big hoax. The Mueller report showed it. He didn't even know what was in his own report. I mean, what an embarrassing failure. And now this thing with the Ukraine gate and this quote-unquote whistleblower. I mean, it's not even under the terms and conditions of a whistleblower. He doesn't fit the definition, or she, okay? But they changed the rules. They changed the rules. They keep changing the goalpost here. And it's transparently obvious. Richard, I'm sorry, Daniel.
Yeah, I think it may be Bolton or Pompeo, who knows. But, in a free society, the media has an adversarial relationship with government, with the regime. That is how it had been in the U.S. for a long time. That, as you point out, has broken down. This is more like what you see in a banana republic, where your media is up there to bolster and support the positions of the regime. And if you're opposed to U.S. foreign policy, for example, try getting on the mainstream media. Trust me, I know about that. And you talk about the marriage between the government and the media. That is indeed a fact. You also have a marriage between the national security state, the military-industrial complex, the arms manufacturers, and the government. They're all in bed together. And Peter, there is a word for that, and it's an F word. It's not the one you're thinking of, but it's fascism. And that's unfortunately where we're heading, where ideas themselves are constricted and are not allowed to be expressed. And even if you express them in alternative media or social media, guess what? You get nuked, and that's what's happening.
Yeah, well, that's what happened to you on Twitter, okay? I'll leave it to you to give the details at another time here, okay? I know all about it here. Richard, is it fair game to investigate Joe Biden and his son in Ukraine? Is that fair game in your mind?
So if there was any basis, we now have everybody who's anybody in Ukraine, everybody in the international community, everybody, Tom Bossert, the president's own, in the White House advisor, saying this was all baseless. So there's as much basis for investigating Joe Biden as there is for going after Ivanka and Don Jr. and everybody else in the Trump family, from the president on down. And I would suggest that there's actually more basis, because we know Ivanka's getting all these trademarks in China, where guess what? Her father is dealing with the Chinese all the time. So I just think this is a bunch of smoke. We saw the last poll out of Michigan had Joe Biden beating Donald Trump by 19 points. Yeah, that's exactly why they want to take Joe Biden out, because they can't abide the notion that there may be somebody that Trump's going to run against who was going to basically make mincemeat out of him. I'll say one final thing.
Okay, go
what
ahead.
you call propaganda, other people call facts. When you say that Schiff had something to do with drafting this, Donald Trump said that, Peter. You have zero basis for that. I think it's a little unseemly to put something out on the airwaves where you're just regurgitating
but that's been reported in media. It's been reported in mainstream media, just not media you watch, Richard.
Not that he helped draft anything. No.
Okay, but if he had, would it have been wrong?
But he influenced it, Richard.
If.
Yeah, well, Richard, you're looking at a congressman that is a serial liar. A serial liar for 3 years, okay? So Adam Schiff is somebody you better stay away from because he's a very tainted person. I mean, under normal circumstances, he would have been removed from Congress for that with such, brazen behavior.
Absolutely.
But I don't really, it's not waste our time on someone of such little significance here. John, let me go to you. I mean, just because Joe Biden is running for president, he can't be investigated for malfeasance in his son that he might have introduced and helped with? Is that hands you can't touch that because he's running for president? Go ahead, John.
Name me one senior role, right, in terms of job applicant where there's not a thorough background check. This should be part of the background check, right? Rich is talking about Ivanka and so forth they were doing business around the world before President Trump ran for office, right? So this is part of their normal
but their father wasn't president.
Doing business with different countries. When it comes to, no, they've always done business. But when it comes to Biden, his son that has zero experience in the energy industry gets a $50,000 per month contract. Then he gets $1.5 billion from China. This is fraud. This is abuse of power. This is what we're talking about from the top of the show. Leveraging your connections to profit from, what's going on in terms of commercial activity, political activity, and so forth. This is absolutely connected, and we've only touched the tip of the iceberg. You know what Mayor Giuliani said? The prosecutor that was fired under the pressure by Vice President Biden. He said, you know what? That prosecutor is driving around in like a Pinto, right? He's the most broke, corrupt. If he was corrupt, he's the most broke, corrupt prosecutor in history.
He lives.
Meanwhile, the current prosecutor is riding around in a Bentley.
Okay.
This is nonsense. This
John,
should be investigated.
Hang on here.
If people are serious about meddling, it should be investigated.
Okay, I mean, Daniel and I have studied a lot of Ukraine, and I warned people, Americans politicians should stay away from Ukraine because there's a lot of stuff that can stick to you, okay? And a lot of people are finding that out right now. It's an incredibly corrupt place, okay? I'll let Daniel finish out the program. 40 seconds. Go ahead, Daniel.
Well, all of these regime change operations are by nature corrupt. You go back to Kosovo when you had Albright and Wesley Clark getting involved in business right after the smoke had barely cleared. You saw the French passionately attached to the oil in Libya, driving the Libya operation. The Ukraine coup d'etat that the U.S. supported was also a corrupt endeavor. And you ask, who benefits? Well, we see who benefits. Biden's son, Kerry's son-in-law, or whatever he was. All of the elites benefit from this. The U.S. goes and throws bombs and destroys entire societies and then goes in and rakes millions of dollars. This is a scam. It's a scheme. It's an attack on the American people and American values. This is the deep state. The elites benefiting, the parasitic class benefiting off the labor of the rest of us and enriching themselves.
All right.
And it's anti-American.
Okay, on that note, gentlemen, we've run out of time. Many thanks to my guests, include Washington and in New York. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time. And remember, crosstalk rules.